I'd like to call to order the July 15th Board of Supervisors meeting. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll start with announcements. There would be a conditional use hearing for Chestnut Road Apartments 83 Chestnut Road starting at 6 p.m. on Monday, August 19th, 2024, prior to the Board of Supervisors meeting. I think we amended that. That's going to start at 5:30 on August 19th, the conditional use hearing for Chestnut Road. Chester County Town Tours and Village Walks come to Tredyffrin on August 1st at the Baptist Church in the Great Valley on Valley Forge Road. Visitors can visit between 5 and 6:30 p.m. The tour includes the church and cemetery with histories of Tredyffrin's earliest residents. These are super fun. If you haven't done these, they're really informative and worth the time to do. I would like to make one other announcement, which is not on the agenda. I just want to recognize the events that occurred this weekend in Butler, Pennsylvania, and make a statement that violence has no place in our community, and wish President Trump a speedy recovery. Now, with the approval of the minutes, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. The board met in executive session prior to this meeting to discuss legal matters. Now we go to supervisor liaison reports. Supervisor Humble.
The Parks and Recreation Board met last month on Wednesday, June 12th, and amongst the regular agenda, we had a presentation by Simone Collins regarding a master plan for Friendship Park, which is in Paoli, and this was predicated by discussions for putting a dog park into Friendship Park and for doing other updates such as improving the paths and the walkways, which if anybody has been there, you've seen how broken up they are, and hopefully doing some updating of the playground material. The presentation that we got from Simone Collins was very, very comprehensive, and involved them presenting plans to put the dog park actually on the north side of Friendship Drive on about 2 acres that they said belong to Friendship Park, which was news to all of us on the Parks Board. And presently, if any of you drive by there, when you go down 252 and Friendship Drive, it's a very weedy area. Sometimes you'll see service trucks parked in that area. And so the plan that they had presented involved putting in a parking lot just off of 252, which we did not like the idea for because we thought it presented safety issues for how you had to pull in and back out of the parking lot there on 252, as well as requiring persons to cross Friendship Drive in order to utilize the rest of the park. So we thought if people have children, perhaps they're coming for the dog park, but they want to use the bathroom, they have to cross Friendship Drive, or if their children want to go play, again, it's crossing Friendship Park where they're not able to see everybody. So we asked Simone Collins to go back to the drawing board and to taper it down, because what the Parks Board had really been envisioning was putting a small dog park on the eastern side of where Friendship Park presently exists, as well as marking the parking spaces in the existing parking lot so that it would mark out where people actually can park, and it would show that we actually have room for several additional parking spots. We also talked about the needs for new pathways walking through there as well, and that really the priorities were putting in a dog park, fixing the pathways, and putting in some new playground equipment. Hopefully if money came available, to put in a small comfort station bathroom there as well. So while they presented something very big and it would have been at a cost over $2 million, we said, really we're talking about something much smaller. Parks and Rec Board projects are usually very limited to what we can get through grants. So if we, present something this big, it's likely that nothing will ever get done. So our next meeting, our follow-up meeting, was last week on Wednesday, July the 10th. And we did not have additional presentation by Simone Collins yet, but we did have several residents from that neighborhood just off of Friendship Drive who had shown up to this meeting. And a large part of it was to air their dissatisfaction with potentially putting dog park on that small limited space because it was right behind their homes. And additionally, they said people would absolutely be parking in front of their homes more along Friendship Drive, which, while that's not against the law and people park there occasionally, they thought that they would be inundated with a lot of people parking there rather than parking off of a small parking lot off of 252 because it would be safer for them. So certainly we lodged their concerns, and we assured them that that was not the park board's vision for putting anything park-wise at all north of Friendship Drive and for what we were looking for. So they were happy to hear that. Otherwise, they were happy for any and all improvements that might be done for Friendship Park. And the next meeting of the Parks and Recreation Board will be on Wednesday, September the 11th at 7 p.m. here in the Township building. At this time, Simone Collins is going to come back with their re-envisioned ideas for a much more scaled-down version of proposed renovations for Friendship Park, and hopefully we'll be able to pick some reasonable updates for the park from the list of what they present, and then thereafter that start to go after some funds that could be used to implement these changes. So if you want, I would encourage anybody to come to the September meeting. The Parks and Rec Board does not meet in August as a matter of course. It's never met in August. That's largely because so many people are traveling or getting ready for back to school. So we hope we can see anybody who's interested in this subject at the September meeting, or feel free to email to the Township any ideas, suggestions, or concerns that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Humble. Supervisor Holt.
The Historical Commission did not have a formal meeting this month. However, I look forward to seeing everybody at the Baptist Church in the Great Valley on August 1st. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Holt. Supervisor Gussie.
I don't have a report tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Supervisor Wysocki.
I have two reports, Planning Commission and Libraries Board. The Planning Commission met on June 20th and considered the sketch plan of the Tredyffrin Easttown School District for the conversion of the office building and property at 1200 Sweetsford Road to use as a new elementary school. The school district was seeking the advisory recommendation of the Planning Commission on impervious coverage, setback, and fence height variances that the school district would be seeking from the Zoning Hearing Board at a future ZHB meeting. The Planning Commission unanimously approved a favorable recommendation to the Zoning Hearing Board of the variances sought by the school district. The next meeting of the Planning Commission is on July 18th, 2024. The Libraries Board met on June 27th. The meeting began with honoring Beverly Michaels, who retired after 25 years of dedicated service to the Paoli Library, most of those years as the branch director of the library. We thank Beverly Michaels for her many years of commitment to the Paoli Library, its users, and our township. The board then addressed its remaining business, including, among other things, Libraries Director Mallory Hoffman reported that the kids and adults summer programs are in full swing. The Makers space at the Tredyffrin Public Library is open to the public for individual projects. The library's website is being updated. Look for previews shortly, and meeting room policies are under review and will be revised. Kate Corrigan of the Tredyffrin Friends of the Tredyffrin Public Library noted the Friends activities and stated that the next book donation day was July 27th. Lastly, Treasurer Rob Rosen noted that the library's financial condition remains healthy. The next meeting of the library's board is on July 25th. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wysocki. Supervisor Bhaskar.
Thank you, Chair Miller. So I'd like to start with by thanking Supervisor Wysocki for covering the Library Board of Trustees for me. The Traffic Committee met on Wednesday, June 26th, and the highlights of the meeting, there was a request from a resident about speed bumps on Crestline Road. There was a presentation, and there was discussion, and there was, people arguing for it and people arguing against it. There was no specific decision taken, which basically means that there was no decision taken. There was an issue with school pickup traffic at Anthony Wayne Drive and the Walker Road intersection, and I suspect that, until more kids start taking the bus, this is going to be an ongoing issue. We literally can't have every school pickup area policed every day. We don't have the officers to do that. But anyway, that was an issue that is brought up. There was a request for a pedestrian signal at the Cedar Hollow Road underpass so that people in Paoli could get to the Chester Valley Trail. That again was considered not feasible at this time because that would have to be part of a much bigger development because there are access issues on both sides and stormwater issues, so it's not a simple matter just to change the traffic lights to allow that to happen. There were concerns about parking on Orchard Road, but it turns out those concerns were primarily about landscapers parking their trucks when they're mowing the lawn, and there's probably not a whole lot we can do about that. And there was a request for a sidewalk on Old Eagle School Road in the area of Woodcrest Road, but I don't think there was any discussion of that. There were also discussions about traffic a resident brought up issues of traffic, complaints about speeding on Adams Road, and also about the stop signs on Hancock, I believe. So, and by the way, on the stop signs, one of the points that was made was, if you have a sign on the stop sign that says, full stop free, rolling stop $150, that is not an approved stop sign, makes it technically an illegal stop sign and theoretically not enforceable. So, please don't put up any additions to stop signs. The next meeting of the Traffic Committee will be on September 18th. With regard to the Environmental Advisory Council, the meeting of June 25th did not happen because there was not a quorum. The next meeting will be on August 27th. There is no meeting in July of the EAC. That ends my report. Thank you, Chair Miller.
Thank you, Supervisor Bhaskar. I would just add one thing to your report, that since the Traffic Committee, the Township has painted the white lines by the stop signs on Adams, which seems to be making a difference, just for what that's worth. Supervisor Johnson-Pugh.
I have no report at this time.
Thank you very much. Next is a motion to approve 4 proposals necessary for the replacement of the underground storage tank for the fuel pump system for Public Works. Mr. Duraco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Currently, the fuel tank that we have down in Public Works is the original fuel tank that was installed when the Township complex was built 30 years ago. And so that tank has reached the end of its useful life. And so we're asking authorization to replace that tank, not with an underground storage tank, which DEP does not like anymore, but with tank that would be above ground, but within like essentially a concrete barrier. Everything listed in Mr. Fitzgerald's memo. Design, again, we had to have some engineering design just for the concrete and some other things. Oversight, so we would need to make sure that when the tank is being removed, it's being done so in the environmentally conscious way, is also following the law. Again, construction of actually putting everything back and building it and getting it ready for the actual tank itself and the dispensers. In addition to that, we'll have some oversight from our insurance company. They'll be on site. They'll also do testing of the underground. Total cost of the project is $209,750. We had budgeted $300,000. This will get spread across, all of our funds, since all of our public works funds will be using it. This is a diesel tank as well. I'm happy to answer any questions the board might have.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Duraco. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any board comment or questions? Public comment or questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Motion to adopt Resolution 2024-19, adopting an updated right to know policy. Mr. Duraco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is something our public information specialist, Gabrielle Ignari, has been working on with the solicitor's office. Recently, we've been subject to some right to knows from an anonymous source. That's part of the reason why we wanted to update this, but also we wanted to make sure, we haven't reviewed our policy in quite some time. So the solicitor's office really reviewed it and updated it, so now it's up to today's standards along with everything that's required, and so we're asking the board for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Duraco. Do I hear a motion?
Motion.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any board comments or questions?
Just very quickly, are there any material differences, or what are the material differences between the old policy and the new, or is it mostly just cleanup and compliance?
Cleanup and compliance, but the material difference is to ensure that it's abundantly clear that the township will not accept anonymous requests, that there has to be an actual human resident's name listed, as well as to also clarify that the request must be on either the township right to know form or, as permitted by the Act, the Office of Open Records form, as compared to just making up your own form or adding to the form as we have been getting some requests.
Thank you.
Any other board comment?
I would just like, Joe, could you just talk real briefly about how many requests we normally get? What's the time our staff puts into requesting? I think folks should know, what a big deal this is.
So Gabby gets, I would say, on a minimum, she's getting 5 to 10 a week. Some are pretty quick, just standard property file requests that we can quickly pull. Sometimes, this could take, we're asking for extensions for 30 days, and then Gabby's pulling records upon records upon records. Then we also have to get the solicitor's office involved in, to review. Sometimes we're redacting information, so it takes us, quite a bit of time. I would say each month, there's, we track them. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but I would say she's, 5 to 10 a week. Easily.
And not only staff time, but also our solicitor's time and the money that we spend from our budget and responding to these requests. All good things. We support transparency in our government, but it just, with the law comes costs and time from our staff. So.
That's actually important. It's not a trivial piece of work to comply with all these. Any other board comments or questions? Public comments or questions? Thank you. This is a roll call vote. Supervisor Humble.
Yes.
Supervisor Holt.
Aye.
Supervisor Gussie.
Aye.
Supervisor Wysocki.
Aye.
Supervisor Bhaskar.
Aye.
Supervisor Johnston Pugh.
Yes.
And I vote aye. Motion carries. Motion to execute a hazard mitigation grant program agreement between the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and Tredyffrin Township. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. You have Mr. Burgo's memo in your packet tonight. He's not here tonight, so I'm handling this item. As you recall, the board supported an application to remove some residence location in Park Ridge Drive as part of a property acquisition program. But you authorized staff to work on this application. The application has been approved. And we were notified by FEMA for the funding for the home acquisition project was moving forward, which granted us approximately $2.7 million. Tonight, we're asking a request to actually authorize the application to begin that process of the home acquisition. Homes acquisition. There's 2 homes on Park Ridge. Happy to answer any questions.
No, thank you, Mr. Martin. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any board comments or questions? Public comments or questions? Mr. Clark.
Obviously, a really good thing that's been in the works for a long time. We talked about this at the Stormwater Task Force. 2.7 million is a lot of money. Is there a plan for what's going to happen in that area, like flood prevention schemes downstream? And, can you tell me?
Yeah, part of that, most of that is for the home acquisitions to pay the homeowners for the fair market value of the home based on the program that's established through PEMA and FEMA. And then really we return to meadow conditions, and we're not going to build it at this point. We take ownership and have to maintain it, and then we'll have to decide what to do with it. But it's going to be restored to natural conditions as soon as the properties are demoed.
And this includes the money for demolition, for example?
Yes.
I mean,
That's
that's
the full
certainly
amount.
a lot more than market value of those couple of houses. So.
Yeah, that's part of the whole project, is to take over these properties, demo them. There's the application fees, all the costs that go along with that, the demolition, the grading, and then restoring it to natural restoration.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Any other public comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to approve the proposals from Construction Master Service LLC for Tea Garden Park court resurfacing and from Brenneman Company for court epoxy painting. Do I hear a motion? I'm sorry, Mr. Draco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is, I believe, actually our last major court resurfacing. We've been, over the last several years, trying to repave every single one. I believe this is our last one. The pricing this year was fantastic. The total cost of the project is a little under $68,500, well under our budget. I think we had $100,000 in the budget this year just based off of last year's experience. So we're happy that it's under budget and looking forward to doing this.
Thank you, Mr. Draco. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second? Any board comments or questions? Public comments or questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to approve memorandum of understanding between Tredyffrin Township and the Tredyffrin Township Police Association. Mr. Duraco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This memorandum of understanding with the association solidifies and formalizes something that we've been working on with the board over the last couple months, and that's to provide the township the opportunity to establish a cadet program where we would be able to send somebody without the necessarily, certifications or requirements to become a police officer, the opportunity to do so. It also establishes a formal lateral transfer program where we will now be able to recognize certain officers' years of service that they have put in at other departments and recognize some of that seniority in their base pay. I want to thank the chief and the command staff as well as the union for working with us on this to getting this done pretty quickly. I know the chief's pretty excited, I know we are, and so there's only one minor thing that I want to make the board aware of. In paragraph 3H, it says repayment of the items listed in 3H, it should say 3G. So I'll just need to ask the board to make that minor. Other than that, I just want to thank the board for its support as well, and happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you, Mr. Duraco. I'm going to ask Supervisor Basco to make the motion with that amendment.
So I'd like to make a motion to adopt the agreement with the change that Section 3H, which carries a reference to itself as Section 3H, which is a typo, it should refer to the prior Section 3G. So with that fixed to the typo, I'd like to make a motion to adopt it.
And do I hear a second?
Second.
Any board comments or questions? I would just add that this has been a lot of time and effort on the chief's part to get this tool in place, which should help us. They're convinced, and I'm convinced, will help us recruit officers to our force. And we already have a fantastic police force, and this will be able to keep it that way. So I think it's a great piece of work, and thank you for both staff and to the police force. Any public comments or questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to authorize the township manager to execute a letter of support for the Valley Forge Trout Unlimited application to the trustee council for the Krabby Creek Stormwater Project and post-construction monitoring. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This one is pretty straightforward as presented. This is a letter of support as we've done at our June 17th meeting for a similar project. Valley Forge Trout Unlimited is seeking a grant in the amount of $99,000 from the trustee council to support a number of on-site infiltration testing to take place on a number of projects, but also a portion of it will be also used to install performance monitoring devices to infiltrate, to monitor the beds post-storm so they can get some valuable data. So it's actually a great application. We're happy to support it and happy to answer any additional questions as well.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do we hear a second?
Second.
All right. Any board comments or questions? Public comments or questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to approve the settlement agreement between Tredyffrin Township and Joshua Ryan Baylor. Mr. McKenna.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a zoning enforcement matter that stems back to the last quarter of 2023. Mr. Baylor had installed an accessory structure in front of the principal dwelling located on the subject property, which was not permitted, and he did so without a zoning permit. Township Zoning Department had issued some notices of violation, which went unanswered, and then in due course filed a civil complaint in Magisterial District Court when there was no response to the notices of violation, and judgment was entered in favor of the township for $1,000 in February of this year. Contemporaneous with that process, Mr. Baylor filed for zoning relief at the zoning hearing board level in January of this year, seeking to permit his accessory structure to remain in that location. Zoning hearing board denied him at that point. Once the denial occurred, we began discussions with Mr. Baylor on whether or not he would agree to relocate the shed under certain conditions. He has agreed to do so. We have worked with staff and we have talked in executive session, as you may recall, about a potential resolution of this case, which material terms include that Mr. Baylor would remove the shed from its current location and install it in a zoning compliant location. He would also submit a zoning permit and all appropriate fees for the shed. He would submit a site plan along with a zoning permit for review, and he would complete this relocation no later than 45 days after execution of the agreement, subject to his contractor's availability. Assuming he complies with all of those things, the township would agree to inspect the shed location within 5 days, take no further enforcement action on the shed because it would be compliant, withdraw all enforcement notices with prejudice, and waive its right to receive payment of the judgment. So that is the settlement in its in summary that is proposed for the board this evening. I know Mr. Baylor, I believe he's already actually signed the agreement.
Thanks. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do we hear a second?
Second.
Any board comments or questions? Public comments or questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to approve the following escrow releases. The final release of F&H Mainline LP in the amount of $222,153.65, balance remaining zero. Release 1 for Delaware Valley Friends School in the amount of $572,606.24, balance remaining $951, $457, and 51 cents. Ms. McPherson.
Thank you, Chairman Miller, members of the board. As you stated, the dollar amounts for these two escrow releases, they have been reviewed by our consultant team and acceptable for release.
Do I hear a motion? Do you hear a second?
Second.
Any board comments or questions? Public comments or questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion to appoint Joseph Duraco as Chief Operating Officer. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Chairman Miller, members of the board. It's my pleasure tonight to have this motion on the agenda. As a township manager over the years, one of the fun part of my job is mentoring and encouraging colleagues in the profession to grow and find their career path. be part of the good governance in this township and in the state and county and in the nation. So we go to different conferences and you meet a lot of different people, but sometimes when you have a really good person working for you, you want to encourage their growth, and hopefully that growth will continue in the current organization. So I'm really happy to make this recommendation. I think it's reflective of the type of work that Mr. DeRocco has done for us over the years. He's not just a standard assistant manager or chief finance officer, so I want to upgrade his title a little bit to be reflective of the duties that he does for me and for you and for the residents. He's involved in every different aspect. He talks to everyone in the different departments, works well inside and outside the organization. So I think this was an appropriate time to make this recommendation. Happy to answer any questions.
No, thank you, Mr. Martin. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any board comments or questions?
Yes, I would like to say that, certainly working with Mr. DeRocco over the last few years, it's been a pleasure. He's always responsive, has the answers, explains things to me in a way that I can actually understand. So I'm greatly appreciative. I'm glad that, congratulations on this position, and I'm glad that things are, that you're going to move into that role.
I'd also like to say that I've had the pleasure of working with Joe now more than 11 years, and it's been great. Whenever I have a question, I get an answer. I get a response. Worked with him closely when I was chair. We did some things. We got a bond issued when bonds weren't being issued here in this township for capital endeavors. And he's deserving of this honor, Chief Operating Officer. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, I just want to add, for the residents' benefit, that Joe deeply cares about the service that the township provides to residents. I mean, he he thinks about it a lot. He cares about it. When we are wrestling with where to spend the money or how to do certain things, he is always thinking about how we provide good service for a good price effectively for the residents. And I think, as just to compliment Bill on promoting him to this level, I think this is absolutely positively the right move for us to make in the township, and we're thrilled to have Joe here. So, any other?
Sure. I would like to reiterate all the good things everybody has said about Joe DeRocco. He really is a gem here for the township, and he does not turn down any opportunity to help. And he's very informative, and he does really care, and he pays attention to all the little details. And I know that I, for one, appreciate it, and I know everybody else does too. So I'm all for this. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Any public comment? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Motion to approve development agreement, financial security agreement, and stormwater O&M agreement for Ropel Company, 105 Vincent Road, subject to certain conditions. I think this is contingent on the escrow agreement being approved. Is that right, Mr. McKenna?
Yes, essentially that is correct, Mr. Chairman. This is our standard form of developer agreement, financial security agreement, and O&M agreement for the 3-lot subdivision and land development at 105 Vincent Road, which was approved by the Planning Commission in March of this year. Counsel for the applicant is here in case you have any questions, but what I will note is that while the development agreement and the O&M, the development agreement is definitely done. The financial security agreement I've reviewed and approved. The cost estimate, however, is still under review, which is to justify the amount of the financial security agreement. So right now it's about $267,000, which has been proposed by the applicant. Typically, I would bring this to you once it's been approved by the township so that we know exactly what the amount is. The applicant has requested, because they've had to move settlement several times, that we will not be able to meet again before settlement is slated to occur. If we could approve this agreement, subject to final review and approval of the cost estimate, which would accompany the financial security agreement. That final financial security agreement then accompanies the development agreement. I would like to also make a contingent upon I want to make sure that the O&M agreement has been approved as well. I believe that is the case, but I want to double check. And then secondly, that we would hold, as a condition of approval, we would hold those agreements in escrow until they were executed and approved by the appropriate staff, and that no plans would be recorded. So sort of a longer condition of the motion that I would ask of the board if it's acceptable. We talked to staff, and they're comfortable with us doing this to try to accommodate the applicant in this situation. The net effect being that the 267 listed in the financial security agreement could change slightly. Once that cost estimate is approved, it could go up, it could go up, it could go down a little bit. So it would be contingent upon that final review and approval by Princeton Hydro and Mr. Burgo when he's back from vacation.
So if we approve this tonight, this motion tonight, are we then saying it's completely subject to staff agreeing to?
It's subject to staff completing their review to justify the cost estimate that's attached to the financial security agreement. It's subject to staff confirming that the stormwater O&M agreement is also final. I think it is, but I just want to make sure that they agree with that.
Okay, and if for some reason staff didn't agree, this approval would not be valid?
That's correct.
Okay, all right. Do I hear a motion?
So moved. Second.
Any comments from the board?
I guess my comment is I'm just concerned about these projects because for those who know where we're talking about, and that we're talking about the one on Vincent.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. There's going to be 3 houses, 3 lots, basically building on an incredibly sloping ground right off 252. The developer is proposing $1 million homes in these 3 lots. Basically, my comment is we have always depended on our staff and our engineering department to monitor and focus on our projects, and this is, I think, an incredibly important one. I'm glad that they are looking to make sure that they have the appropriate amount of escrow needed to make that happen. It's just, this project gives me the willies, but our engineer has approved it, went through it, we have the stormwater control, so I'm fine with it, but it really goes to show how developers are looking anywhere in Tredyffrin to build, including on incredible slopes, places you wouldn't even think they could develop. They're looking to come and develop, so we just need to keep our eyes out. That's all I would say.
Thanks, Supervisor Holt. Any other comments?
Like Supervisor Holt, I am shocked that anybody wants to build luxury homes on this spot. I drive past it several times a week on 252, and it seems like one of the worst places in the world to build luxury homes. I'll be even more surprised by who buys them and moves in. I think it's a terrible project. I'm not for it, but since our engineers have approved it, otherwise, there's not much we can do. So I just want to put that on the record that this, I think it's foolhardy to put homes there. I mean, I should just come out and say it. I mean, I can't believe anybody wants to put $1 million homes on this location. It's been used so much for stormwater before. It backs up to a very busy road that already, I think, doesn't drain fast enough from all the storm waters, and that's with having those lots there to absorb whatever it can. So I guess good luck on the project, and we'll all see.
So, yeah, I have a couple of comments. I'd like to echo some of the other concerns. This is a very steep slope. And certainly there are going to be stormwater issues, but I will accept the engineer's judgment that the project plans have adequate stormwater controls, but it is a concern. Also, with 252 out there, that's going to be a very noisy place to live. So I'm not sure that it's going to be a particularly desirable location, but I'm not here to make commercial comments. But I will note that we did get one complaint from a resident about the Planning Commission on this one, which is that they made the decision in March. But because of the fact that the April meeting was not held for the Planning Commission, the minutes of the March meeting were not actually published and approved till May. And that seemed to be to the neighbor who complained a valid reason to to protest. So I want to echo that protest and make sure that it's heard.
Thank you, Supervisor Bhaskar. Any other board comments or questions? Public comments or questions?
Hi, my name is Greg Hess. I live at 66 Crestline Road in Wayne. To make a general comment, I've lived here for about 30 years now, and during that time, no surprise, I think, to many of us, we've seen an increase in development, increase in population, and reciprocally, we're seeing a decrease in the quality of life. Because of that, I would argue and suggest that the council or the commissioners consider requiring, and this would be something we couldn't do tonight, I understand, but requiring that developers have to fund and conduct a study that looks at both the direct cost to the township, the indirect cost, as well, and the quality of life. I'm an economist, and I've worked for the White House for approximately 3 years, and during that time, especially at the federal level, but also at the state level, this is a classic type of study that we would do. So we understand the motivation of the developers. They are profit-driven, and that's fine. We're in a capitalist system. However, the township ends up having to bear the cost, I would argue, of those downstream costs that aren't considered in the current permit processing. So maybe something the township wants to take a look at. If so, just as a citizen, I'd be glad to contribute my time and efforts. I'm sure other folks would as well, so that we understand going into this, what's the true benefit and the true cost to the township of approving these types of developments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to follow up with you after this. That was interesting. Thanks.
Good evening, Arthur Zadrowski from Painters Lane, and as always, thank you for your service. I want to echo some of what the first gentleman said and add to it, I guess, on two questions. We're all concerned about stormwater and other things, and engineers look at the data and they project forward, what would be needed. But I guess my question is, how forward-thinking are the data that the engineers have? Are they really looking at what the situation's going to be realistically 10, 15, 20 years from now that is going to be impacted? And granted, this is a small project in a big township, but these things are cumulative. So I would just ask that we were maybe testing the water here to make it a little bit not more difficult. I want to see development. I want to see people invest in my community, but I don't want to see consequences that the rest of us suffer. The same thing too with the noise issue along Barron Hill Road there. It might seem obvious to us that it's a noisy road, but lo and behold, someone comes in, spends a couple $1 million on a home, and then all of a sudden turn around and complain. And are they going to come to the township and say, "Oh, you got to put up a noise barrier"? Are there potential issues, and is there a way to make sure that that is clearly made, known? You buy this property, you buy it in the condition. The township is not going to make it more livable for you. So just a couple of other thoughts on this topic.
Mr. Zarat,
Yeah, that's Sharon.
I agree with you completely. In this case, if they consider the noise or the traffic a nuisance, too bad. The tenant you moved to the nuisance, you knew it was there, and I wouldn't grant them any relief. I can't believe somebody would have a backyard there where children are going to play, and a car could so easily crash through their fence.
Yeah, no. And I'm not even proposing we provide any relief. I'm making a point. Let's be sure we're not pulled into being forced to, or at least incurring legal costs to defend the township from having to do these things.
Yeah.
People come in with expectations that, are not necessarily reasonable.
Yeah, so. The property owners right now, to me, they've been bad neighbors. Things fall, branches fall from their trees all the time into 252. They do nothing to cut them back prospectively. They don't do anything to help clean up, big logs that roll into 252 and cover the grates. Yeah. And it's the township that ends up cleaning all that up. So, again, I just see this as a terrible project. And unfortunately, I guess we'll see it play out. And, and
okay. Again, thank you.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Ann Murphy, 5 Berkshire Terrace. And as a member of the Environmental Advisory Council, we were involved with reviewing this project over a period of about a year and a half. It started out with 6 units on that lot and no stormwater controls. And the end point was 3 units with an easement so that the 3rd unit, which had a larger lot, couldn't subdivide in the future. The AC got riparian buffers to be built along the stormwater channels. The stormwater got moved below the houses. Unfortunately, it went through a month before the woodland ordinance passed, so trees were cut down that would have normally had to have been replaced. But I think even though you look at it and you say, well, that's not a great project, it's a lot better than it would have been a year and a half ago. And I think the developer did act in good faith on a number of points, along with the township engineer. So just wanted to share that perspective. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. I know a lot of work went into this project before it ended up in front of us here today, so I appreciate that. Any other comments? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
No.
1 opposed, okay. Motion carries. Any board member new matters?
Just one comment. Pat, with the settlement agreement that we just approved, is there any recompense for your legal fees, or I know we are waiving the $1,000 fine. I just feel, listen, it was already approved, he signed it, it is what it is. I'm just a little concerned about moving forward in the future that we recoup some of the expense we have in certain enforcement situations like this.
So not as drafted, but I didn't get involved until the appeal. So I didn't have anything to do with the enforcement notices or the magisterial district court complaint. So yes, there are some costs, but they're pretty low. I want to say around the order of like $1,500. So, but no, what this is contemplating is you're giving up that and he's going to move all this within a certain amount of time and still get permits and reviewed on the plan and everything else. So that's what's contemplated by that agreement.
Fine result, okay with it. I would just, continue to encourage anytime we have to enact an enforcement action that we try to recoup some of those enforcement costs.
Agreed.
Thanks.
Any other board member new matters? Citizen new matters?
Hello, my name is Mary Geyer. My husband Dave Geyer is here with me tonight. We have lived at 5 Carroll Lane in Berwyn for 36 years, since March of 1988. I am retired from corporate life, but the one thing I learned in the years that I spent there is you don't have to understand, you don't have to agree with the decision, but you do have to understand it. And I'm here tonight to talk about your short-term rental policy. The house next door to us got sold in April of this year with the intent immediately to put it up for rent. Within a week, it was available for rent. And now they've moved on to using it as an Airbnb. So there are a number of cars there every week. They don't water the plants, they don't water the flowers, they don't take out the trash. So as you can imagine, in Airbnb, it's a very transient population. The neighbors on the other side have said they've started locking their doors now when they didn't before. So I'm curious about a couple of things. One, what were we thinking when we said that that was acceptable? Now, I have learned today information that I find a little conflicting from what I've heard before, but I did hear today from Aaron that I am in Zone 2, in M2, and we do not allow in M2 anything less than 30-day rentals. However, those people are there. There were more people coming as we left tonight. So if that's in fact the case, if M2 does not allow for short-term rentals, then I'd like to know what's the enforcement policy for having these people removed and have this stop. I mean, it's advertised now on Airbnb.
So this was a recent change that we solidified that it's not allowed. It's not allowed in M2, and I think now that we know, it's a lot of times we don't know until we're told.
Yes.
So you would let our enforcement know, and Aaron, you can let us know how that process works.
Right, so Ms. Geyer did reach out last week, so I did contact the property manager for the Airbnb that was provided to me. And they actually have already changed the ad. I looked at it later, or before the meeting. The Airbnb was already at a 60-day minimum. It was also on apartments.com as a 3-month minimum. The VRBO doesn't seem to have changed yet, but sometimes it's just a matter of they have to actually update the system before it goes through. But the property manager was aware that he was no longer permitted, or he never was permitted to have a rental of 30 days or less.
Okay, so in the township, we do Airbnbs, right? Just not in R2.
Right, you can have them, they're permitted in some locations. They do require a special exception from the zoning hearing board to be able to have them. There are a couple of conditions that they have to meet, and then they would also have to register the property as the Airbnb, or as the short-term rental.
As a short-term rental. And in terms of the 30 days, is there any conditions on renting a home, or is that the same as any of us would have as homeowners?
Right, anyone could, you mean if it's over 30 days?
Yes, if they're renting it for 3 months or 6 months.
Right, they would be able to do that just like any other property. Yes, anyone can rent that.
Okay. Okay. I think as long as they stop with the Airbnb. I mean, there were people pulling in when we left tonight, so I'm a little concerned about them actually stopping doing that.
And you can certainly contact me, you know, if you are noticing a change of ownership or a change of tenant more frequently. We would need to work maybe together, because obviously they may move in, you know, at odd hours where we would need your help with determining that. But we could certainly look into that if it continues.
If it continues. And what did you say about 60 days?
So that's what it was listed on Airbnb today. That the minimum, if you checked Airbnb, if you tried to check in, it would only allow you to check in for a 60-day period.
So that must be literally new within the last few hours, because the last time I checked it was probably 3 or 4 o'clock. So that must be really brand new.
I checked, it was noontime.
Okay, well, I'll look again before we leave. Anyway, that was my concern. I think it's been heard. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Continue to work with Aaron on resolving the issue, please. Yeah, thank you.
For sure.
Thank you.
Could you state for us the address of this property?
Yes, it's 7 Carroll Lane in Berwyn.
Thank you.
We live at 5, and this house is at 7. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, folks. Thank you, Aaron.
Any other citizen new business?
Hi, back again. Greg Hess. I had talked with some of the commissioners previously about going to the traffic committee, which I did in the previous meeting that was reviewed. And I have a presentation that I reviewed at that meeting that I'd like to review with the commissioners, if that's okay. Okay, can I approach and give you copies? And I apologize, I didn't realize that there would be additional folks, so when I made the number of copies, I have 8, so there might be a little sharing needed here. And I'll apologize to the audience. There is an electronic PowerPoint presentation, but we were not able to show it tonight, so I had to go with paper copies.
Okay, we'll listen.
So just on the first page, you'll see that it's really an issue for us. We believe on Crestline and in Stratford Village, the general area where we're discussing this evening, is really neighborhood safety and speeding. And we would like to talk about solutions. We believe we've come up with a good solution after quite a bit of due diligence and research. I'll just say before proceeding, I'm also a board-certified emergency physician, and part of the reason that residents in the area had asked me to look into this was that I, as an emergency physician, we see the damage that occurs from motor vehicle accidents, particularly with pedestrians. So if we go to the next page, this is just to orient us as to where Crestline Road is. It's essentially between two fairly busy rows of North Wayne Avenue and also Old Eagle School Avenue. Also, those avenues are getting, of course, progressively busier as our population has grown, and there's data that indicates as well that people commuting into the Wayne area is also increasing.
Do we have actual data on speeding on Crestline?
We do. There have been previous traffic studies conducted.
Recording in progress.
There have been previous traffic studies conducted. Unfortunately, when I asked for the data, those are not available. And just as a recommendation I had at that meeting, I would encourage the town to keep that data so that, we can see the trends that occur. Are things going up, down, or staying the same?
Yeah. So, Chief, do we have that data?
Yes, we do.
Can we share it?
Yeah, sure. Briefly, there was a traffic data was collected in May, scanned approximately 3,833 vehicles. Eastbound was 2,130, westbound was 1,703, average speed 21.6 miles per hour, 85th percentile was 26.6 miles per hour. In the breakdown, only 7 vehicles went faster than 11 miles per hour. Only 1 vehicle went faster than 15 miles an hour, and that's the threshold most enforcement's used by the officers throughout the township. And from our traffic unit, the 2024 data nearly matches the 22 data. The traffic unit, Corporal Sprito is going to do a follow-up survey the end of the summer into the September once traffic gets back into normal flow after the holidays.
So what's the speed limit on that road? 25, right?
25.
Yeah, 25. And what's the 86th percentile again?
85th percentile was 26.6, but the average speed was 21.6, and only 7 vehicles were over the 11 mile per hour enforcement threshold of the 3,800 vehicles.
Yeah, we understand that, and certainly, we feel, and I think it's very logical as well, that although enforcement occurs at 11 miles over the speed limit at 36 miles an hour, the speed limit is 25, and there are a substantial number of cars, essentially 1 out of 3 to 1 out of 4, as we'll see on the next pages, that are speeding. They're going faster than 25 miles an hour. So although I understand fully the 85th percentile, that is a standard that was created in the 1940s in the United States when cars were less powerful, and the purpose of it at that time was actually to help set speed limits. So that helped to set the speed limit, and I'd like to emphasize that limit of 25 miles an hour. The fact that we are choosing not to enforce speeding with a ticket or a violation until 36 miles an hour does not mean that cars going at 36 miles an hour should not argue for speed humps in the neighborhood. And that's definitely our position for the majority of people in the neighborhood.
But isn't, my understanding from traffic, don't we have to meet certain criteria to do speed measures? And I mean, that sounds like it would not, was the assessment that we would not adjust any of the speed limit or add measures?
We follow the PennDOT warrants.
Warrants, that was the word I was trying to think of.
PennDOT warrants are the regulations we follow throughout the township for our enforcement actions and for the roadway design. I'm not a design, I'm not an engineer. We're on the law enforcement side. In the traffic committee where this was discussed, there were all the relevant people at that meeting with the proper knowledge and whatnot, and they looked at the data, and at that time out of traffic, and I believe Supervisor Bhaskar was there. There was a discussion, and it wasn't going to be acted upon. And once again, traffic unit said we're going to do a follow-up study in the coming months. But from the data they collected, there's 7 vehicles that would have been enforcement at 3,800.
Right, but there would be substantial additional number of cars if the enforcement was at the speed limit. The fact that we're choosing not to enforce it, we might as well make it 40 miles an hour.
I don't think that's an accurate way to portray that, sir.
I think it is.
I think it's inaccurate, but it's 11 miles, and we're allowed to only enforce after 11 miles per hour. That's what the units that we have, which is VASCAR. We don't have radar. When the Commonwealth authorizes radar for local law enforcement, then you can go to 6 miles an hour. Right now, we're only allowed to go to 11. Even in the 11, we're still within minimal number of vehicles out of 3,800.
Well, that was 1 out of 4 to 1 out of 3. I'm not sure that we in the neighborhood would say that that's minimal. If we go on,
What's the,
to
well,
this,
the 1 out of 4,
could I
what's the
finish the
difference in the 1 out of 4?
presentation maybe, and then take questions?
Well, it's public comment. You're welcome to make your comments, sir. I was just trying to give you the data.
Well, on the data, I'll have to say as well, just to clarify this, the data that I asked for the previous study, they could only find one page, and I asked whether that data represented the east or the west or combined. I was told at the time that they were not sure what that data was. So if you happen to know today, that would be very handy to know. Do you know the answer to that, of that 2022 study?
The packet that was given me by the traffic unit was two documents for the 2024 study, and I have one document for the 2022. I do not have the other one.
But Chief, if I understand, you have data now, you're going to review this study in the fall.
Right.
When traffic picks up again, and we'll have additional data, and let's consider it when we have all the information. I mean, we're not opposed, but the data doesn't support what you're asking for right now.
I think that it does. The fact that we're using an 85th percentile, there are many organizations, and if we look at the research out there and the publications, there are many that do not support this 85th percentile. They support exactly what we're suggesting, that the speed limit is set at 25 miles an hour. The data that was recorded, it's in black and white, we would argue, show that there were a number of cars going in excess of 25 miles an hour. For every mile that you go over the speed limit, and this is from the National Transportation Safety Board, you increase the mortality rate 3%. So if you're going 26 miles an hour instead of 25, that's an issue. Part of the reason that I don't understand why there seems to be so much resistance from the police department in particular on this is that these are used throughout Pennsylvania. There is a publication, in fact, if you look later in your handout, where the state of Pennsylvania talks about how satisfied communities are with putting in speed humps and speed cushions. So the state supports this. The research supports this at both the federal level as well, the National Transportation Safety Board, the Federal Highway Administration, and also the state of Pennsylvania in its publication. These are called sleeping policemen, so they would not require any additional manpower from the police department, yet we haven't approved one in the entire township in the last 5 years. That seems, on the face value, to be something that's not logical, right? There's really no downside, or I'd like to understand what is the downside to having a speed cushion put in?
Sir, can I ask you?
Let me make a proposal, Chair Miller, which is that Dr. Hess has a presentation that he wants to get through. Let him get through the presentation, because I think that we're jumping back and forth and we could be here all night on this. So let's go through the presentation. If anyone has any questions, they can ask the questions, but let's not keep going back and forth.
I do have a question, because I'm looking at this, which, if I'm understanding you correctly, you're proposing either a speed bump or speed cushions, or on this.
Sorry, just to clarify, no, not speed bumps. I know it gets into some nomenclature, but yeah, gentle cushions is the way to think about it.
Okay, so you're asking for a general cushion to be put on the highway so that the people who are driving would stay at that 25 miles, and if they go over it, it's going to affect their car in a sense.
Yeah, It hasn't been linked to damage unless they're going at very high speeds. So if they're going 25 miles an hour, they can keep going 25 miles an hour. But if they're blowing through at 36 miles an hour, that is going to make them uncomfortable.
Thank you.
Thank you. So if we go back to the problem page, I'm sorry? Yeah, I'm sorry, I took this to Kinko's. We're on the page where we're going to talk about, it is about 5 pages in. Is it okay if I sit at the table so I'm not trying to, thanks.
As long as you're talking into a mic.
Okay. And can you hear me now? Yep, okay. So we got page 1, page 2. 3 shows the extent of traffic on Old Eagle School Road. And on page 4, it's headed the problem. So there's been an increased volume in traffic, and the reason there's a range here is because, again, the police department, who I respect and had a good conversation with, but just the facts are they did not know what the 2022 data was they were giving to me. They didn't know if it was just eastbound, westbound, or both. Okay. So the study showed that, again, 1 in 3 to 1 in 4 cars was exceeding the speed limit. To clarify for those who have not been on that, there's lots of foot traffic. We have no sidewalks. The SEPTA regional train station is right there, and that entrance and exit is on Crestline Road. So you can imagine as cars are coming down, trying to make their train, and pedestrians are also running, trying to make their train, there is a high likelihood of collisions. Their enforcement, as was mentioned, is prohibited until 11 miles over the speed limit per statute. We understand that. Continuing growth is planned in the surrounding streets and areas. For example, just past that line for Tredyffrin, we know that there's a major development going in on Stratford Road, which will also increase traffic. The importance of this is that studies show that even small increases, again, increase morbidity, mortality, meaning 1 mile an hour increases your mortality 3%. If you turn the page and look at the page that says NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board, this is their title, Speed Kills, and I agree, certainly, we're not doing enough to stop it. What this demonstrates is as you go from 20 miles an hour up to 40 miles an hour, which is close to what is the limit for enforcement, they don't start at 36, you can see that this changes from 10% on the right mortality to 40% mortality to 80%. So mortality is going up as you increase speed. I mean, that's just a logical thing that we would, I think, all agree makes sense. The majority of Crestline 2, we've had substantial discussions in our neighborhood. We had a petition, and we had 124 signatures. Also, if the township looks back in its minutes...
Were those on Crestline?
I'm sorry?
Those signatures on Crestline?
They were Stratford Village. So it's Crestline and Briar and Beech Tree.
Yeah, so just to understand the use of the public comment time, you're way over what would normally be the kind of thing we do. So let me just finish. I'm not telling you to stop yet, but let's just be clear here. You had your talk at Traffic Committee, which is where this presentation is appropriate. I think we'll give you a couple more minutes here, but there's other people in the town, in that residence area that probably have things to say too. So let's hear a little bit more, and then let's get the data that the chief has talked about getting in the fall, and let's get together with the actual data we have, and talk about it then, all right? And talk about back in traffic. I'm happy to show up in traffic and talk to you there, but go ahead.
I hate to ask another question. I'm uncomfortable asking it, but it has to be asked. I don't know, and I don't have the records. I was involved in Yeah, I was definitely involved in another one of these, and I remembered. And how many accidents, quotes, accidents or accidents, incidents have there been there?
I was not able to get that information from the township. I did request
What do you
it.
mean you weren't able?
Meaning I contacted the township and no one responded with that information, and they said that they do not keep a complete record of those accidents that
Some of them are not.
where the police are not contacted. So if there's damage to the vehicle but no one's injured, the police do not record that. So it's underreporting.
Okay, well, right. That's a definition of, I hear what you're saying. If there's no one injured, and it's a fender bender, I'm just making this up, it may not be reported, of course, for all kinds of reasons, as we all know.
Sure.
Chief, if they're generally reported, and if the police are involved, we generally have that information.
So
I was just curious. Not that in what you're trying to discuss here would be dispositive, but I think it should be considered. We would put that in the mix. But bottom line is, if they aren't reported, we don't know about it.
I think the bottom line is that we don't want to wait, right, until someone gets injured or killed by a car accident.
Of course, that is
Right.
absolutely correct. But that's absolutely correct. I'm saying though, if we've gone, it's a question of what has happened there. If we had something, that's fine. Even if we don't have anything, I understand what you're saying. But it must be considered, because if you came here and said, oh, we've had we know of 3 over blank years. Okay, what were they? All right, we put that in the mix. I understand what you're saying. I think it's something that's got to be considered though here, that's all.
Let's I think we need to get more data about I appreciate you bringing the issue forward. I think we need to let me just finish, please.
Yeah, I apologize, I guess, for coming here. I actually asked whether I should come to this commissioners group after I'd gone to the traffic committee. So I was encouraged to do that. So if essentially that's not the protocol, for whatever reason, it's not appropriate, that's fine. I don't want to take up your time, and if there's that apparently significant opposition to presenting this information, that's perfectly fine. I'm here tonight on of course, my own time, because I asked, should I come and present this? And I was told specifically yes. So, that's fine. I don't have a dog in this fight, if you would. I'm just doing this as a public service.
Can I make
let me just finish here.
Thank you very much for your time.
I think we do appreciate you bringing it forward. I think we need to get more information. I think some of the things that Supervisor Wysocki asked about are things we need to get. This has got it on the radar to talk about. I can tell you that we do hear, I personally hear requests from people who want speed bumps on their street and near their house and nowhere else. That's the problem, is people always want them, in front of their houses, but not other roads. And that's why they never get put in. But let's get a little more information and we'll talk about it, all right?
Okay.
All right.
I have a question, if I could. And you're right, Supervisor Miller. From time to time, I hear people want speed bumps along Old State Road between Valley Forge Road and Contention Lane. The only road I can think of off the top of my head that has speed bumps is Central Avenue, there by Delaware Valley Friends School, and they've been there at least since I've lived in the township, 25 years, but I'm wondering if we know the circumstances under which those speed bumps were installed, and are there other streets in the township that do have speed bumps? So those are my 2 questions.
So the East Central ones that you're referring to are raised mid-block crosswalks. They are not speed humps. That's not their purpose. Their purpose is for pedestrian crossing. And there are 2 other locations that pre-existed, and that's it in the township, Walker and Thomas. And they've been there for decades. And part of the township, I think over the years, a lot of people want them. The decision that the police and the engineering department have standards of which they follow with the data. And if it's something to consider if the numbers are there. Normally when you actually do the study, It's not. So it depends how you look at it. Certainly the data can be looked at many different ways, right? So if you're going 1 mile over the speed limit, you're over the speed limit. I understand that. But there's also enforcement regulations and how much can be enforced at certain points. And that's usually what we use as our data. So we'll get more data and follow up with the gentleman. I know, and he did a good job and he did ask, should he come? And so public comment is public comment. We certainly welcome him presenting this information to you and the board, and you guys can follow. He can follow up directly with the police chief and the engineering department and the traffic committee. At this point, it hasn't shown that met our criteria, but that doesn't mean it won't in the future. So we'll certainly continue to look at it.
Bill, can I ask a question? And I think I heard the gentleman right. I just got to make sure, or it might have been the chief that said it, that to put the speed bumps or cushions or wherever we are, we're following PennDOT's rule or PennDOT's however they have it. Was I correct? Was it you, Chief, that said that? The PennDOT?
We call them PennDOT warrants, and I'm not a traffic engineer, and pretty much I rely on what the traffic engineers say. We collect the data and do the enforcement, and we work with the engineering department.
Okay, so if it has to do with PennDOT, and I'm just thinking, do we in this town, if it's coming from the state, and I guess I'm looking at, I sit on the borderline of us and Radnor. I sit right on that borderline. And there are streets in Radnor Township that have, I call them speed bumps, small streets and what have you. So I'm just trying to figure out how, if we're all following supposedly the same protocol, how in the world are they able to do it and we're not able to? Like what makes the difference that they got these speed bumps in and we can't get this, or we don't put the speed bumps in? Am I saying it right?
So there were, again, it's the data, what your standards are. There are minimum standards with PennDOT. If you leave liquid fuels, everyone wants a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit, right? But a public road, it's unenforceable. So you can't have a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit under PennDOT guidance. So speed humps, it depends on traffic volume, all different criteria besides just speeding. You know, and the township can look at it different ways as long as it meets minimum PennDOT standards. So that's the problem. Once you start going down this road, if you start changing the limits, it'll open up speed humps all over the township. This is why we've been following the PennDOT warrants. You can make it tighter, but you're going to have these all over the place. It'll be construction costs, maintenance costs, and all the things that go with that. Emergency services aren't a huge fan of them. Again, it's how you interpret the data and where you go with it. So that's more of a policy decision for the board. But at this point, we've always followed the minimum PennDOT standard. It requires, so every township is different. I know when I worked in Radnor, they had to have an 85% tile agreement by the neighbors at a minimum to even be qualified. So you could set whatever you want, but above the minimum threshold. But that's why at this point, that's why we've had those. We don't have speed humps all over the township.
West Town is similar. They generally require 75% of the surrounding residents to be in on that because of the impacts that they have. They make noise when you go over them. So to Bill's point, every municipality that I have seen is a little slightly different.
But they're all looking at what PennDOT is. I guess that's what I'm looking at. Everybody's looking at what PennDOT is saying, but they can make their own.
Yeah, we receive liquid fuels. There's a minimum, like to receive liquid fuels from PennDOT, which is the money we use to pave our roads. You have, if it's a public road, there's certain minimum requirements, and one of them is, it has to meet PennDOT warrants. You could go above PennDOT warrants, but generally the minimum is a PennDOT warrant, which is why we've had people come in before, like, why can't I get a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit? Well, because it's not allowed by the state. Like, that's the minimum standard, 25. Like, and people have in condo developments that are not public roads, you can put 10, 15, whatever you want, but on a public road, there are minimum standards.
It sounds like this is an issue we need to, as a board, get better educated on and get some information about how we got to here, and then have a real meaningful discussion about it, because I think we're not, really don't know enough at this point. So that's, I would just like to leave it that we need to put this on our table to think about further, but nothing's going to happen today. Just, okay. I mean, you did get it on the table, so just to consider that a success. Any other public comment? So I hear a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Your second, all in favor? Aye. Thank you very much.